Today we're going to be discussing one of our solutions that we represent for wide area connectivity and basically working collaboratively between multiple offices. This is certainly an area that is challenging and in recent years has seen a lot of activity, and with a little bit of help from people like Microdesk, we can maybe get you some better solutions than you might currently be having. To start off, let's just take a quick look at sort of how an organization, when it grows in size, copes with the changes and the requirements that they have insofar as collaboration goes. In the beginning, you might have started out with a couple of detached single workstation systems, which performed very well, right? You had high performance CAD workstations or modeling workstations that essentially had all localized storage. Everything you were doing was self-contained and isolated. And part of that problem is the isolation. As the office grows and you move into a single office environment, you need to introduce components that allow people to work together in a local area network configuration. And so you'll typically find a file server based arrangement where people are accessing shared storage and working on their individual workstations with the same sets of files. But now, as an office grows and you maybe start a branch office or have to deal with a trailer on a job site, as you bring multiple offices into the mix, the collaboration environment becomes very much more complicated, and some of the solutions that worked in a single office environment, they start to really show the limitations of what that technology can provide. So as we grow into that sort of WAN attached, wide area network attached sort of methodology, the dependence on the network resources that are supporting your users was traditionally handled in one of a couple of ways. Historically, you had replication schemes that might attempt to copy data between various locations, and I guess contrary to that, you could also have a centralization scheme where where you would have a single really heavy-duty file server system in a centralized office. But both of these have problems. In the replication arena, you've got issues with with getting the data between sites. This confuses the end users. It's horrible to manage. And then on the other side of that equation, where you've opted for the centralized storage, it was traditionally very slow to access. Which gave rise to sort of the first generation of solutions for centralization in the terms of WAN accelerators. And these came out a couple of years back, and they basically took the form of a couple of different technologies that were pretty cool in their own right. You had first generation sort of caching devices that leveraged things like WAN compression and block level replication. But they were still far from perfect, because if anybody remembers back in 2007 when AutoCAD changed around their file format, they decided that they were going to optimize on every save. Some of the technology that those WAN accelerators were built to support in the sort of the block level differencing that they were doing to minimize the amount of traffic that was sent over the WAN were for all intents and purposes really leveled unusable for a time period, while some of those kinks were sort of worked out and things were addressed. So I mean, in this scenario, we still have pretty long open times. I mean, you're still using that local area network connected to another local area network between an internet connection or dedicated circuits between offices, which typically result in really high network costs over time. And having to maintain these somewhat costly devices at both ends of that connection. As we move forward a little bit in time, as the as the remote desktop type of solutions performance increased, some firms attempted to try and go to a Citrix or a Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol type of solution, where their investment is really positioned in server-side hardware, which is actually running the application, and then you have a very lightweight connection between the users to desktops that were provided by each of those connections to the remote machines. This still, posed a couple of problems. I mean, from a conceptual point of view, the users have to deal with multiple desktops. The where did I save that, and then in the server farm scenario, they might not always be connecting to the same physical host. So you bring into the mix a lot more complexity in the network configuration. So what are firms going to do, right? So you end up with this very expensive to implement strategy that is very dependent on either some form of support, either guys who know Citrix very well, who probably in all likelihood are very inexperienced with Autodesk software, or you turn to a reseller who probably doesn't have the Citrix experience. And so what this generally led to is a lot of finger pointing. And then even if it was done correctly, the compute density that you sort of get out of this type of a scenario was a far cry from the 100 or so users that you could get with an Office application. In an optimized system on averagely priced server hardware, you're probably only going to get 6 to 8 users per server, which is not a fantastic return on your investment for that hardware.